If you try this one, you will see that these are definitions of critique: analysis, assessment, evaluation, account, review, appraisal, assess critically, evaluate. Those are synonyms for critique. If we move to criticism, we will see that the synonyms are different. We will see censure, disapproval, disparagement, condemnation, denigration, which are much harsher terms than critique. Where does the word, of course, critique and criticism are related. They have the same root, they come from Greek. And the original meaning in Greek is to pass judgment. And this is what we should be concerned with. Of course, it means to critique something is to criticize it, but not necessarily in the denigrating fashion. It means to make a judgment. And if you are making a judgment, you know that something is wrong. What you are critiquing or criticizing, something is wrong with it. You have a standard. If a judge is making a judgment, he knows the law, and he knows that the action he is judging someone according to the law has been a transgression of that law. It also means that we know that something should be different. There is an alternative. And it means that we know the alternative. The alternative to untruth is truth. The alternative to a wrong idea about how the world came into being is the right idea about how it came into being. And if you have a whole so-called holy book that says, well, it was created in 6 days by Sabbath 6,532 years ago, we know that this is a wrong idea. And it should be criticized as a wrong idea, based on science. We have the alternative. Now, criticism or critique can come in two forms. You can have explicit criticism and you can have implicit criticism. And we'll go further into those two forms. But again, I reiterate critique or criticism in the sense that I want to explain here is not bashing or denigrating. It is an evaluation process. It is a serious criticism because there is another view of reality than the one that is to be criticized. So, implicit criticism. And we are talking about critique of religion. What does that mean? What would be an implicit criticism of religion?
Saying something which, well, that's just obviously indirectly kind of encompasses religion and says something negative about it, but doesn't mention it.
Well, to a certain extent. But I would say that you don't even have to speak to make an implicit criticism. You're all here now eating, drinking. We are in the middle of Ramadan. You are criticizing, in practice, implicitly, by eating, by drinking, having your coffee. You are implicitly critiquing Islam and the requirement to fast during Ramadan. Because you're not doing it.
But we are not Muslim.
So you are still criticizing Islam. You are criticizing that practice by not participating in it. And furthermore, you just said it. By not being Muslims, you are criticizing Islam. You have chosen otherwise. You have taken the alternative. And since you are active humanists, it's not even an unconscious process. I mean, it's not something that just happened. It is actually a conscious choice that you have made, which implies a criticism, not only of Islam, but all other religions. And for those religious people who says, no, 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 we don't engage in criticism of religion, of course they do. Implicitly, they criticize every other religion. It is unavoidable.
I think that you can simultaneously believe that Islam is the best religion ever and not practice it. That's possible. It's implausible, but it's possible.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily an implicit criticism, because you could argue that of yourself.
Well, to a certain extent, but for those who have chosen another life stand explicitly, then they implicitly, even though they don't, even if we say, I'm not concerned about other religions. For me, the important thing is to present Islam in a good way, present humanism in a good way, or Islam or Christianity. Then you are implicitly stating that the others are wrong. I think this is an important fact, because when you are criticizing religion, you will hear, oh, you're only negative. You do nothing but criticize. First of all, critique is extremely important, and it is a positive process, so I've tried to show you. And secondly, everyone criticizes everyone else. It's unavoidable. It's logic in a way. So, of course, to a larger and smaller extent, because we're talking about degrees, we're not talking about absolutes here. Some people will make more out of their humanism and therefore move from implicit to explicit criticism of other positions. And some people are saying, well, I don't know what I believe. I don't care. Well, then they are not concerned about life stances, and their implicit criticism would be also a very weak criticism, of course. Explicit criticism comes again in two connected forms. We can talk about theoretical critique and practical critique. And I'm not going to say much more about implicit criticism, but about the explicit criticism, because that is the activity we can engage in a conscious manner. So, what would theoretical critique be? A theoretical critique would be of theological and philosophical positions. You could argue about the lack of logic in the concept of God, for example. What does it mean? What does the word God mean? What kind of concept is this? And you will hear many things like, well, it's personal God. He's revealed himself in the Holy Scriptures. It's a He. He has created man in His image. He has created man with free will. Well, as an afterthought, He created woman as well. Possibly also with a free will. But definitely with the idea to tempt man. Etc., etc. One can go into these specific details about God as it is presented, and you will find that the more specific, the more concrete the concept is made, the easier it is to criticize. The most difficult concept of God to criticize is the one that says, well, there must be a first beginning. You know, what was before the Big Bang? Well, if you want to call that before the cause of Big Bang, if you want to call that God, be my guest. I don't care. It's nothing. It's not the God of the Quran, it's not the God of the Old Testament, it's not the God of the New Testament. If theologians present their God in that abstract way, well, let them have their day. It doesn't matter. Then the concept has been emptied. It doesn't mean anything. But the personal God of Christianity, which is supposed to be all love, omnipotent, and all knowledgeable, and then not be responsible for evil in the world, is an illogical concept, pure and simple. Oh yes, I know of the philosophical attempts to square the circle, but they don't work. Free will argument doesn't come into it. Because God is also the cause of tsunamis, of disease. And not only that, God is also the cause of evil, pain in the animal world. Why should that be exempt when we are looking at love? Is it love that the lions have to eat and rip apart while still alive? The gazelles in Serengeti? Is that love? Why did he create the gazelles, the tungsten gazelles, the other animals with the feeling of pain? If he's all loving. Well, that's one example. There is, of course, also the lack of evidence for a God. All the contradictions with science, inconsistencies in ethical positions. Some of them follow from the statement that, oh, God is all love. Still, we have the death penalty for those who are not believers in God, blasphemers and so on. You can go to the Old Testament, you can go to the interpretations of Islam, etc., etc. So here again you have inconsistencies. You have unequal dignity for people. From a modern point of view, these are very simple facts to point out. You can go to Hinduism and you can look at the caste system. And this is divinely sanctioned. And you can say, this does not square with equal human dignity, equal human worth for all human beings. It's in contradiction to modern ethics. It's in contradiction to human rights. You can say that about Islam, their approach to dhimmis, peoples of the book. And you can look at the history of Christianity and you can see, well, there was no equality between the sexes. Still, we are struggling for the recognition of equal dignity and equal rights for gays, and so on. Rejection of democracy that we will find in certain religious interpretations also goes against modern ethical norms and standards. And you can multiply the examples yourself. This is a theoretical, or if you like, a philosophical critique of religion. Some people say this is for philosophers. We don't care. Well, then you have the other form of critique, the practical critique. The critique of religious practices, like circumcision. And I use the word circumcision advisedly here because I want it to comprise both female genital mutilation and the circumcision of boys. Of course, there is a big difference in degree, but in principle, both are a violation of the rights of the child to physical integrity in the name of a religiously sanctioned practice. So this is something that we find, and in many countries, female genital mutilation is prohibited by law. So when people are practicing this, one could not only say that we are critiquing religion, but we are actually critiquing crimes. People are committing crimes when they're practicing this. Now, the circumcision of boys is not outlawed in any country as far as I know. It's a common practice in many parts of the world. And it can be, and I think it should be, criticized as meaningless, as with no basis in medical research, in science, even though some people say that there are certain indications that circumcised men will not be infected by HIV as easily as uncircumcised men. There are some studies in Africa, from parts of Africa, that says this. Well, this research is sort of problematic. And is it enough? I mean, is that a good idea that a man, a mature man, would have unprotected sex? Is that a good enough reason to snip off the foreskin of an 8-year-old? Or 8 days old child? I mean, if If someone is mature enough to have sex, well, then you can say, now you should consider circumcision as a means of prevention of HIV. It's not something that parents should decide for their child when the child is still a child.
You know, I work in epidemiology, and well, the evidence is strong. I'm not defending circumcision, but the evidence is strong that circumcised men are less likely to transmit HIV to women, and at the same time, they are less likely to transmit the human papillomavirus, which is responsible for the uterine cervix cancer. So, and this is very controversial, and more than 100 years of controversy about the issue. Will the circumcised men in the countries where this is a common practice, the incidence rate of cancer in women, cancer of the cervix, is less.
Still, the Canadian, the American, the Dutch, the Norwegian Medical Association, pediatric associations are saying, well, the evidence is not conclusive, we do not recommend this. On the contrary, we do see it as an infringement of the rights of the child. My point is not now to go into concrete and detailed examples on each of these points. My point is that here to clarify on this example, circumcision. And this is interesting because the Norwegian government just sent out a proposal where it says, and this was because there has been no regulation on circumcision. So you had an accident. There came some circumcisers and circumcised 2 boys in Western Norway last year, late last year or early this year, can't remember. Anyway, they ended up in hospital and it was an outcry. Something has to be done. So the government says, we want to regulate this, we want it to be done in hospitals. And what do they say? They say, well, this is a religious tradition and practice. Now, if you have a religious reason, i.e. if you are a Jew or a Muslim, then you can have your child circumcised for free in a Norwegian hospital. If you are a humanist, or if you are an unbeliever of any sort, but you believe in those scientific findings, you will not have your child circumcised. Then it will be against the law. It will be prohibited. So here you even have a clear case of discrimination of reason. Because there are some reasons. I don't find them weighty enough to accept circumcision. But still, if I say, I have read all the medical reports, and I do believe that these reports in favor of circumcision, on that basis, I want my boy circumcised. Please do it. The doctors will say, no, we can't. It's illegal. It's against the law. But if you convert to Islam or Judaism, then we'll snip it off. To me, this is ridiculous. And this is not only here we're talking about a critique of the Norwegian government's total lack of logical reasoning. Well, other areas where practical critique of religion is highly relevant is this discrimination of women, discrimination of non-believers, sexual abuse, in the context of not a religious ritual, that's not what I'm talking about, but within religious institutions. Institutions that are closed and protected, like in the Catholic Church. It is a big problem. And it is a problem that the Catholic Church hierarchy has refused to acknowledge for too long. And the abuse has been going on and going on. It is critique of religion, i.e. religious institution and religious practices, when you are critiquing this kind of abuse, these institutions where the Pope has tried to, well, we keep this to ourselves. On the negative practices. It might be easier to get broader support to create alliances with people of religion when one concentrates on the specific practices. Because if you enter into the theoretical debate, that can open also for a critique of those religious people that you want to be in alliance with in the struggle against a specific practice. So here there is a connection, and you have to decide in each and every case how you are going to use or not use the connection between theoretical and practical critique of religion. Now, I want to move to an ethical framework for critique. Yes?
Why didn't you mention prayer? We were talking about practice.
I left it to you. I mean, this list is not comprehensive. Absolutely not. It's endless. And it will vary from, there will be big variations from religion to religion and from region to region and country to country. Because there are always local interpretations and local understandings of even the most unified theological system. I mean, we would think that the Catholic Church is very unified in its beliefs. But I mean, all those variations with all the different interpretations, the different monastic orders, etc., etc., etc.
And what is important are social practices. I am against any kind of ahistorical criticism, because in my country, in Chile, for instance, one of the points in your practical list was the support of dictatorships. Well, some segments of the Catholic Church in Chile were the only organized force to protect the persecuted under the dictatorship, and some priests even, they were very brave in defending the rights of Marxist people who were explicitly atheists. So I think that we should, and on the other hand, we have had in Latin America perfectly atheist dictators who sent to murder many people. So
it's quite right.
The good ones and the bad ones is not a divide on the thing that does one believe or not in God, but what do you actually do as a human being?
And this is very important when we are looking at the history of religion. Because it's very easy to say that, well, look at the history of Islam and you see murder and slaughter and you see enslavement and you see the oppression of the non-believers. Look at Christianity and you have the Crusades, you have the church blessing slave trade, wars of religion and so on. Yes, but don't forget, and this relates to Latin America, don't forget how, and this is very interesting, because it was the Dominicans who believed in property rights who said that the Indians of the Americas, they own themselves. They cannot be forced to be subjects to the Spanish king.
Yes.
They have to voluntarily submit to the rule of the Spanish king, because they are free human beings with a soul. And it was the theologians in the Renaissance human tradition, Sepulveda among them, who said, no, they are animals. They don't have a soul. We can enslave them. So in this case, it was the Dominicans.
Las Casas, Father Las Casas.
Las Casas is the most important in his debate with Sepulveda, defending the rights of the Indians. He wasn't quite consistent because he accepted the enslavement of Africans. But still, these are important steps in the historical development of human rights. So we should not be unnuanced in our critique of religion. That is very important. If we are, then we lose credibility. We have to be credible. We have to actually relate to historical facts as they are. I would like to go through this, and if you have questions of clarification that need, please interrupt. Otherwise, let's take the other comments towards the end. Make a note, because, well, we can go on, but then there will be no lunch. So we will suddenly all become Muslims. Criticism will offend. It's unavoidable. Some people take offense to anything. I mean, I forgot to say hello this morning to someone. Some people will be offended by nothing. So, obviously, a critique of religion will offend some people, and it will offend some people strongly. My point is that the fact that criticism, even serious critique, will offend someone cannot be a reason why you do not criticize or present a critique. Sometimes even criticism should offend, because you want to provoke, you want people to think, and to go, you know, the way of offending someone is a way of making people waking up. It's not always efficient. It should also be remembered. It's not an idea, okay, the best way is to offend all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes, under certain circumstances, an offense might actually be a good thing. The main point, however, is that criticism should not violate the human dignity and basic rights of others. This is the basic principle. This is what the rest of my talk is going to be about. Now, how to criticize religion within a humanist ethical framework? There are two basic concepts, extremely important here: respect and toleration. Many people think, yes, we know this. We have heard these synonyms so many times, it's almost boring. This is basic. So, bear with me. Respect means admiration, high opinion, deference, high regard, reverence, even fear and awe. So, what can demand absolute respect? This is a question I would like you to try to answer, briefly, if you can. Well, you're too slow. The absolute moral requirement is respect for human dignity and basic rights. I don't know of anything else that requires absolute respect. You might admire me as the brilliant lecturer I am, but that is not a universal requirement. I mean, you can think that, well, any lecture is boring, I don't care, doesn't matter. I'm more interested in football, and, you know, a great football player, he is worthy of respect. Again, you're talking about a specific area. You cannot demand that chess players should have the admiration for football players that you, as a football fan, will have. It's a relative form of respect.
I was just going to ask how things like respect for environment and that sort of thing would come under that. I guess it doesn't really relate necessarily directly.
It might, but it's an interesting, also problematic, philosophical question, not least for humanists, that has an anthropocentric basis for our ethics. Some humanists are sliding here and saying, well, we need to include the whole environment and so on. I think that's problematic. I'm not against affording nature with some sort of respect, but philosophically speaking, it is problematic. Ethically speaking, this is not problematic. This goes a long way back, and it was given its perhaps best presentation by Kant, Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher. Now, on this basis, we can clearly see that no one can demand respect for their ideas, beliefs, opinions, religions, utterances. And this is important, because when you start critiquing religion, people will say, you don't respect my beliefs. And they are right. You don't. Why should you? Because if you respected that in the absolute sense, it meant that you had admiration, high opinion, deference, high regard, reverence for Christianity. And you obviously don't, because you're a humanist. And no one can demand that you should have or hold their religion in high regard. What is it you should hold in high regard? The right of the other to have an idea. These distinctions are extremely important. And the problem here is to see how it works in practice. Theoretically, presenting to have ideas that are different. Pluralism in a world of human rights is unavoidable. One could even argue that it's a good thing. Because if there weren't any religions about, the humanists wouldn't know that we are right. You need the other. You need other ideas. We need plurality in order to test our opinions, our ideas, our truths. So pluralism, you can argue, is a value in itself. But it is definitely unavoidable, and that is why toleration is. Many will hold opinions and carry out practices humanists strongly disagree with or are provoked by, and we still have to defend their right to do so. And if you think this is obvious, you are wrong. The humanist movement do not agree on this. I have met French colleagues who say, if we cannot take the hijab of Muslim women because of human rights, then we will cancel France's commitment to those conventions. To me, that is an example of intoleration. You're intolerant because you want to forbid a practice you don't like. Some will have a sophisticated argument and say, well, these women are not wearing the hijab of their own free will. And there might be something to that. But if you assume that everyone who has a different opinion from you is an unfree person, then you are also moving down a very dangerous road, because then you become a paternalist and you know better what is best for everyone else, which is, in my opinion, very anti-humanist. And obviously, the fact that we are influenced by our parents, by our peers, by society, traditions, customs, it doesn't go only for religion, fashion, and there are many disgusting things of fashion to be seen, and it would be very strange if we were going to start calling for bans and police and court cases against these things. In short, we do have to defend the rights of others to act in a way that we disagree with. Then our critique of religion will be principled, and it will not violate the rights of others. However, toleration has its limits, and the limits of toleration are also set by human rights. No one can use his or her rights to violate the rights of others. So this goes for expressions. Racist expressions are expressions that trample on human dignity. They are not only an utterance, but they are speech acts that are diminishing the human dignity of those who are the target of the humanist, of the racist slur. Something humanists, of course, will oppose. That's why racism should be banned by law. And we are committed, as we have seen by the Convention, for the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination, to implement national laws that will prevent racist expressions and, of course, racist practices. And this, in many countries, are now seen in a broader perspective. So in Norway we have an anti-discrimination law, and it's quite new, which prohibits the discrimination based on gender, on sexual orientation, on ethnic, racial background, and also on religion or belief. And those are punishable offenses. However, I think our legislators have gone a step too far, because they they have also done something in the name of the good, and that is to turn on its head the principle of evidence. They are saying that if someone claims to be discriminated, it is the one who is charged with the offense who has to prove that he didn't discriminate, and not the one who is complaining who will have to prove that he or she was discriminated, which is problematic from also, in my opinion, a human rights perspective. Thus, since there are certain practices that violates the dignity, the integrity, human worth, and basic human rights of others, we can stop it. And we can stop it with the law in our hand, like sexual abuse, circumcision, and other such practices. I'm not saying that it is easy to draw the line. We have the question of psychological abuse. Some people would say that, well, certain religious practices, for example, the Pentecostals' practice of speaking in tongues, and exorcism and so on, at big meetings where there are children. This is harmful to the psychology of children. And we have cases where people have grown up in such religious communities and they have psychological problems the rest of their lives. The problem here is that the sister and brother who were living in exactly the same family and grew up in exactly the same way, they get out of it and say, well, it was bad, but I move on. It's not a problem for me. I don't need the help of a shrink. How do you then say that this was caused by the religious practice? I'm not saying that we should ignore it. I'm saying that sometimes it's difficult to draw the line. But we need the principles. At least we need to know the principles, be aware of the principles in order to be able to draw lines at all. But we should not try to prevent the voluntary acceptance of discrimination, subjugation that some people are submitting to within a religious community. If you are a grown-up and you say, well, the priest says, the imam says, God wants me to wear the hijab, God wants me not to speak in the congregation, God wants me to stay at home and not work. I mean, if you are of mature age and you have reflected on these things and you say, this is what I want for my life as a woman, no one else can force that person to do what she does not want to do. We should not try to tell other people with force and the law in our hand what is best for them. Humanism means respect for the individual's right to make his or her own choices. You can critique them. You can say that you are wrong. You can even say that you're stupid. Not a smart thing to say to most people, but I mean, if you want to, you have freedom of expression. Even to say that. But you cannot force people to be free. You can prevent people from abusing children, but you cannot force grown-ups to be free. So, we're faced with the fact that it's not easy to find the correct position to Voltaire. However, this saying, which is attributed to Voltaire, was never said by him, but it's still well said. And it is the quintessence of toleration. No one has ever found it in his writings, and people have searched for it. But at the same time, he has said something fairly near to it. And that's why it has come out as something Voltaire said. And the point here, and this is what I've tried to emphasize, it's not only, well, I can live with what you are saying, but it is to defend your right to say it. That is important. So toleration has two elements. The one is to be able, toleration as an ethical norm. One is the ability and will to live with what we disagree with or provoked by, and the other is the defense of the right to have a different opinion, to have another lifestyle, to criticize religion without contributing to the persecution of religious individuals and minorities. And this goes to your question about relativism. Because how do we defend human rights, freedom of religion, and at the same time practice critique of religion? That's the challenge in pluralist societies. Muslims are saying, you cannot critique us because we are a persecuted minority. So every time you say something, you will just add to our burden. And the Islamophobes will, you know, win the day. Well, on Monday afternoon, I'm going to a debate invited by a Salafist youth organization in Norway. And the topic is God, fairy tale, or truth. I'm not going to mince words on their beliefs, and they have fetched a convert from England to come and debate this topic. Some of you might have met him, Hamza Torjisa. He has been stepping up at other humanist arrangements because they want to have a debate. Well, my point is that I don't bar any punches in that debate, because I also defend Muslim rights in Norway. Not only in Norway, defend them in France. When I was Secretary General of the Humanist Association, I sent a letter to the French Prime Minister asking the French not to pass the law prohibiting the hijab on students. Because I think that's a violation of human rights and freedom of religion and individual freedom. Unfortunately, it didn't help. But Muslims in Norway know that this is the position of the Norwegian Humanist Association. So when we criticize them and certain practices, they know that at the same time we defend their right to be Muslims in Norway. That is important. That is extremely important, because it means that our critique of their religion and religious practices is not a threat to them. It's not an existentialist threat to them as individuals, as practicing Muslims. It is something that we can say because we are at the same time defending their rights. In Norway, we have, the law allows not only private religious schools, but we have a system where, just the same as you defend the right to wear a miniskirt or jeans, to be topless on the beach, or have a full bathing suit on the beach. But to say that I know better what is good for you, and you are probably not aware of it, but the hijab is something that you, for me, that is totally unacceptable. Now, there are some limitations here, because being a teacher at Oslo University College, up came the question, well, what about a student with a niqab? Muslim student with a face veil. And then I said, kick her out, who might lessons. I don't teach masked people. I need to see you in order to communicate with you. And for a teacher to see his students and pupils is of the essence, pedagogically speaking. So to accept that students should sit there with masks on, no way. And of course, a doctor, a psychologist, a teacher, a professional cannot teach, cannot practice as a doctor, a psychologist, as a nurse with a mask. So it would be ridiculous to say it's okay to come to our school, have an education, with a veil in front of your face. So there's the limit. If you want to practice religion in such a way that you are wearing the face veil, it's your choice. But you cannot take the education at our university college, because we will not teach you, and you can never practice what we are training you for.
I think there is a slight
Prohibition, like in France now, saying that it is forbidden to walk down our main street, Karl Johan, with a niqab. No, I'm against that.
Yes.
But if you walk into a shop or a bank with a mask and you say, I want service, the staff is entitled to say, no, I don't talk to people with a mask. You cannot demand that people should make an extra effort because you have chosen a specifically religious path. And there is a difference between an impediment and something that is voluntarily chosen. I mean, if someone with a paper bag over his head standing at the street corner is asking, can you help me, can you guide me? The first thing you say is, remove the paper bag and I'll show you. I mean, if it's a blind person, you make the extra effort. That's a big difference.
I have an issue with saying that our university, the person who is coming to study in the niqab, the university is theirs as well. Having said that, I think the hijab or the niqab is an obnoxious practice, should be abolished, but till such time that it is not, there are probably cultural reasons for that person to wear that. The fact that she's come right up to the university and is seeking an education is itself a form of enlightenment. Maybe, possibly, the next generation will abandon that practice. If that person is going in for medical studies, it's hard to find, a doctor's daughters wearing the niqab. So I would say that the way forward would not be to abjure the practice altogether or to condemn it out of hand, but to start with the education process. Take it on faith that the person who's wearing that has reasons for which she cannot abandon it. Take it on faith and move forward, move away from that issue altogether. Move away from the fact that she's covered her face for whatever reason. It's different from a person wearing a paper bag. That paper bag, there's nothing cultural about it. That mask, there's nothing family about it. There's nothing familiar about it. But a hijab, a face covering for women, in many parts of the world, there's a cultural familial issue on that. There are reasons why those women cannot get rid of that in public places. So I think as a society, and I think even as humanists, we need to move beyond that, impart education that is, has universalist values, and hope that in the next generation, at least that particular family is going to move past those issues.
I don't see how we should just automatically accept that that type of expression is somehow more important or more relevant than somebody who chooses to wear a Guy Fawkes mask to class, because they are really the same thing. It is a Guy Fawkes mask for an English person would still be a cultural expression, and it still would be making some kind of cultural statement and a political statement or something like that, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still impeding somebody's ability to do their job or to for that person's ability to learn or to really interact with society. And so I don't see why there would be any difference. I don't think that it would be appropriate for a university in and of itself to just ban that kind of face mask, but I think that it is within the rights of each professional to say, if you're going to stay in my class, you need to remove that. Otherwise, I can't teach you. I can't do my best job.
I think when I hear your argument that the Muslim women should have a right to wear the headscarf on the streets here, I tend to feel that it's a position of a non-Muslim speaking in a non-Islamic community and talking on behalf of the Muslims without consideration of the individual non-religious women's position in their own community. Why I say that is, I think in your argument you should, I wish to hear your feedback on how you negate or refute the arguments of the French government in installing this legislation. But their primary argument in this position was that a Muslim woman in the ethnicity, in the cultural group, who would not want to wear the headscarf would be intimidated if everybody is wearing in their own community. So, if a person here is attending an Islamic cultural event and women are wearing the headscarf voluntarily, she would not be able to attend here without wearing it. And it's very true if you look at the cultural societies in the Islamic world. And I think when we make legislation, it should not be localized into Norwegian non-Muslim community. I think it should be inclusive of the entire humanity in terms of, I think we make local legislation, Norway specific, French specific, or other different regions, but I think we should make our legislation reflective of the human rights. So in that sense, I can't agree with you on that position. And how would you refute that French government position is something that if you can briefly highlight?
I'll refute your argument, because you are saying that we either accept the intimidation of more secular Muslim women, or we forbid the pious Muslim women from wearing the headscarf. I mean, you are using the state to intervene in something. And that is where I think we should be extremely cautious.
Yes. Yes.
I agree totally. No one is an island unto himself. Everyone is influenced. People will be intimidated. Youths are intimidated when their peers have a fancier suit or dress or trousers. And these are facts, and they are not psychologically more upsetting or less upsetting than the fact that you are pressurized by your environment to wear or not wear the hijab. So we are talking about how to maximize individual freedom. We're not going to be able to make it the maximum for everyone instantly. Change takes time. So for that reason, I think it is, yes, we do. I mean, it is part of the fact that we live in a free world that people will behave and influence other people in ways that we don't like and that are contrary to those freedoms that we cherish. And the question is, how do you, over time, ensure more freedom for more people? And if we cry for the state at every possible turn, then we are in big danger. Because human rights are there not for the state to protect us, but for protection against the state, against the majority, against the well-wishers who says, I know what is better. How can you then prevent the continuation of the intimidation of the more secular-minded Muslim women? By critique of religion, by participating in the public discourse and saying that this is unacceptable. And if you find out that someone is forcing their daughters, their wives, to wear the hijab or niqab, then you report it to the police. This is my answer to those questions, because it's so easy. Well, there is a practice we don't like, and it's obviously being used under the cover of freedom for the really pious, those who have really made their own choice. Others are pressurizing those who don't make their own choice, so therefore we forbid the whole practice. But we don't even know. Nobody did research to find out how many French women are forced to wear the hijab, how many French women are voluntarily wearing the hijab. And when we're talking about the niqab, we're talking about students who begin at Oslo University College and then become more religious during their studies. And then decides, now I'll wear the hijab because I've realized what God really wants. And that becomes problematic. We're not talking about someone, and this is actually the case with the few, and we have, you can count them, 4, 5 niqabis in Oslo. They're not more. So we're not talking about a big problem, but that's why we should take the debate before.
You go there for one reason, and that is not to defeat Islam. I mean, next to you is some silly fellow. You're not spending all your time and taking the opportunity to demolish this fellow. The arguments, yes. But we do a public education job as well. So we do our reference work, take our information, and put it in bite-sized pieces, so that whoever is listening to you and watching you will leave with some knowledge when they have finished watching the channel. Leo.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just trying to really understand and apply what you're saying to many of what I've been encountering in the past.
Absolutely.
Yes, I must tell you there was this experience we had this year. I appeared before a commission on let me just read quickly, please. The commission on inquiring into the witchcraft accusation in one of the states in Nigeria. So I had this special session, with the lawyer, who was working. I said, look at where the Helen Obadiah's lawyer, look at where they're going to catch you, the issue of God. That they will set you, what they would like to set you against the commission, so that the commission could find a way to do that.
Yes.
How do we approach this? So I would like to just throw it open, and I will tell you how we did it. So I told them, they will ask you, do you believe in God? So I told them, they answered me, because I don't. He said, no, is there any other way? I got to answer the question. I said that I have two ways I used to answer the question, depending on who I'm dealing with and my audience. But I want to share those two ways to all of us, so that I would like to let everybody. So I told him that when I'm dealing with people I don't properly inform, I just simply tell them my name is I don't believe in God. Period. But when I'm dealing with some people that are not informed, I said, I believe in God as a fiction. He said, yes, that is a fact. That I should say I believe in God. I shouldn't explain. So I said, no, I need that explanation so that they will be clarified. So he said, okay, that he would prefer I give them the second answer. That because they're already prepared to ask me questions along the fact that he doesn't believe in God, it's a demon, it's a sinner, it's a blah, blah, blah. But that the other one will catch them unawares. And honestly, it worked that way. So the first question they asked me, the lawyers asked me, said, you are a lawyer? I said, yes. Do you believe in God? Initially I said, what do you mean by God? He said, I mean the creator of heaven and earth. I said, I was not there, so how do I believe in that? They started laughing in the court. So they repeated again, do you believe in God? So the judge said, look, just answer, very simple. I said, I believe in God, but let me explain. The judge said, don't explain, next question. So things like that. So it caught them unawares and things like that. So I'm just trying to,
absolutely. I think, Leo, everyone answers in these public situations according to their personality. I mean, it's the kind of person you are that you want to liberate, to be able to speak freely. But remember what Lars said earlier, without offending. And usually the most powerful of things can be said with a smile on the face, or no smile on your face, but putting it on the audience's face. That is the way to. I, for example, would have said, which God? And you would move on. Like one idiot said during the solar eclipse that there would be a change of government. I said, which country? He said, mine is India-centric. I said, astrology is Earth-centric universe, now yours is India-centric. So everybody started laughing, he was made a fool of. But we have the chance of only one line, one sentence. And we have to grab that opportunity. Without humiliating them, I think we can have some fun. That's basically the principle of public interaction. Our time's over, but I want to say we've only started looking at the important issues. But I thought these are crucial because this is what will give people an idea of who humanists are and how they are, how they think, how they approach a problem. From the perspective of knowledge, with the intention to educate, but certainly with the aim to win the debate. This is how we will do it. Do not forget that, yes, you have.
No, I just want to get something that I've really got from the presentation. The word flexibility, to different situations.
Yes.
So as humanists, I think the sense of humor in you should really be there. Because you are trying to get out something that you should defend, but without going to the other side to defend, So,
absolutely. I mean, Voltaire was mentioned. The chap always had a twinkle in the eye. Whatever he said it the deepest things possible in the genre that he chose. He said, but always mocking at someone, making some fun. He wrote a poem about the King of France. They got angry. He went somewhere else. Frederick the Great got angry, he went somewhere else, but he didn't stop smiling or teasing people. I think it's a great characteristic we should have. But this is only one aspect of how we develop our personality, to present a good picture of humanism and humanists and the power of our ideas outside our circles. This is how you win friends. How we work to resolve conflicts, how we are able to negotiate, now is an extraordinarily important thing. I think earlier Churchill was mentioned, and there are some stories, probably apocryphal, about he saying, the other guy saying, I don't give way to fools, and he says, I do. Now, when you go and have an argument with someone, you should always know what are the areas you want to concede without harming your fundamental standpoint. It's important. You don't go to win outright. It never happens, not even in war. In an argument, you must be sure this is my fundamental thing. Now, Lars, for example, said, non-negotiable is a respect for the human person, freedom. That is a moral responsibility. No discussion, no argument. There I stand and I shall not budge. Other things, yes, you have a right to put on the burqa and cover yourself up. You have a right to take off your clothes in the bathroom and wear them in the public and cover your face. Okay, but not in my class. Now, he was being pretty strict about that. Yes, there, I accept you have rights, but here you behave yourself. Now, it's clear where and what I shall cede and concede, and where I shall not. This comes to the one who prepares for the argument and who prepares for everything. The one who wins in a meeting is the one who's prepared for it. The chair has more or less, almost always, decided what the outcome of the meeting is. And the chair is really acting out with others and moving the agenda in such a way that you achieve it. I think you mentioned, probably the word is a little tough when you talked about the politicians, about manipulation and trying to manage people. But essentially that's what you're doing. You're moving people and ideas to a conclusion within an hour and a half, 3 hours, 4 hours, conducting a business meeting. But we really don't have time to talk about it. But the biggest problem of humanist groups is not disagreement, but it is conflict. Humanist groups, rationalist groups, free-thinking groups always have fights, not disagreements. There are fights, there are dissidents, people who want to set up their own shop. They want to split, they want to disagree. Now this looking for the difference attitude needs to change, because as humanist leaders, we should know, and as leaders we should know, our job is to collect people and put them in the basket, not throw them out. Now, I think there was a question of can you, I think yesterday when the question came, can you dismiss someone from the membership of an organization? Of course, if the fundamental basis on which that membership was obtained has been dissolved, then yes, there is a case for doing that. But for most of the time, we have to find friends and we have to keep them. And this is not to create one clique in an organization, but it is to move things forward in a positive manner. And the most important thing for a leader is not about making mistakes, it's about being mean or small or playing power politics. I think the element of power is mentioned. The problem comes because we are Democrats, we are free thinkers. We refuse to be in the pail along with the other frogs. We want to jump out. Now, how to keep them all inside is the greatest of talents that a leader has. I, as a leader, favor a particular activism, therefore there's no other place for others. It's a suicidal mission to lead an organization like that. How wide a platform can you create for everyone who is interested with your philosophy to become an activist, applying their knowledge to what you're doing? That would be the way to grow your organization. Is this a vision for the organization? Yes. Is it a demonstration of your personality? Absolutely. These match together. And only then will you become a good leader. I mean, the leader is no longer a position, it's a function. I think in a huge number of societies, you're a leader because then what you say will be accepted by others. It gives you stature, it gives you position, it gives you an ability to command, and so on and so forth. There are other ways of looking at leaders, and I think the modern, functioning, effective way is while leading them with your vision, and when the group doesn't agree, you will not be leader anymore. But as long as you're leader, you are there to fulfill the role, not of a customer service agent, but of giving a direction to the organization. These, I'm submitting to you, are intensely personal characteristics, which we then apply in the organizational context and implement them in the crisis situations that we come into. In personal lives, the same principles apply, but in the organizational life, it's extremely important. So I hope we've had a chance to reflect with your participation on certain things that are required of us as leaders. You want to critique religion? We looked at what you should do while preparing for a media thing. You want to create an organization which is responsive, responsible, and able to work, giving leadership, and we've seen how that can be as a leader. But then, not everyone wants to be a leader. And if everyone wants to be a leader, what about the ordinary members? Now, you want to prepare those members also to take over your role, which is what Jeremy emphasized yesterday, that we are able to hand over to others. Some of the most successful humanist leaders, some alive, some dead, in the world, are those who unfortunately have had a proprietary relationship with their organization. I founded it, I've been the president, I raised money for it, therefore it belongs to me. No, you don't even own your children, forget organizations you found. So it's a different approach one has to have. And I think you said it too, you're willing to let others take the lead. It's your success when others are able to perform well. So the leader should not look at other colleagues as competition, never. Because these are the people who will add to the strength of the organization. Some of you, I know, will agree because you have been successful leaders yourselves. But some of you are starting to found these organizations. Keep it legal, be away from anything that involves moral turpitude, and what you said about Nelson Mandela is the most important thing, and I'll conclude with that. We got back the 10 minutes we lost to the previous session. Now, Nelson Mandela was, as you say, a person who lived his philosophy. You might like it, you might not. You may disagree or agree. But here was one who provided an example through his life. Many humanists, unfortunately, fall far short of this moral requirement of leadership. That is the undoing of most groups, because we are so few, and the enemies are so many, and the ones who disagree are so many, and in the public eye, we are under scrutiny. The smallest of mistake can be blown out of proportion, and people stop coming to you. And that is a crucial thing. Nelson Mandela, when he achieved what he did, and he was asked, they were referring to the party, said, now that you have power, and he stopped the interviewer, and he said, we don't have power, we hold office. The leader is holding office in the organization. And with those thoughts, I leave it there. And no doubt there will be a chance to discuss these at future meetings, and to disagree as well. There are different visions of leadership as well. Gogineni@iachieve.org is my email address, so we can always discuss, disagree, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Babu. It was a very inspiring session, really food for thought. I think we start again at 3:15 sharp here, and then we are going to see what we are going to do when we get home. It will be a session where all of us will participate. Okay, now it's coffee.
Yeah.
there, you should remember, and you got angry, never get angry. Those things, you need friends to tell you. And of course, today we have all the tools available for you to see what your friends are telling you. And that's that one. Record as many of the meetings and debates you are participating in and go through them afterwards. And you will be shocked about the mistakes you did. But that's when you learn. If you have been on a TV debate, try to review it and you will be embarrassed. Did I really say that? Well, then you learn not to say it the next time. But you need the ability to review it. So use modern technology, use video recordings, TV recordings, go through what you did, what your colleagues did, discuss it, and learn from it. It's a very good way of preparing for the next debate. And believe me, the opposite camp is doing that. So we should
why you are
speak about what you want to speak about. So you try to avoid to answer, and you move to the area where you feel secure. I mean, you see it all the time. Watch the news, a politician being asked, what about the riots in England? And he doesn't know anything about social poverty, and so he will talk about what he wants to talk about, harsher punishments for crime, whatever. Of course, this is a cop-out, but it works sometimes. And I'm not saying that this is the strategy that humanists should use. The other answer is, unfortunately, you can never stop learning. You have to read and read and read. You have to go to the library if you don't have the books in your own bookshelf. You have to use the internet. There is no royal road to knowledge. It's hard work. It takes years and years. If you want to know the Big Bang theories, you have to read about Big Bang theories. There is no primer that the IHEU can just, here is what you need to know about the Big Bang, or here is what you need to know about evolution theory. Sorry. So either you use the politician's answer, and that is in many ways the cop-out, but sometimes necessary, and the other answer is that we need to know more. And remember, sometimes, and you have to use this very carefully, sometimes the right answer is, I don't know. I mean, to actually admit that there are things you don't know is very human, and used in the right context and the right way, it makes you the winner in a debate where someone is pretending to know all. To say, well, this is not my field of expertise, I really can't say that. I have colleagues who knows more about it, and so on. So remember to talk about what you know something about, admit what you don't know when that's appropriate, and then sit down with your books and read more. A lot. I'm not a scientist, or not in this field, but I can recommend you some books, some internet places, internet sites, where you actually can read about Big Bang, physics, chemistry, about biology, evolution, etc. So to have that as a backup, where you can give references to what you do not feel comfortable to answer in detail, is also a good idea.
Okay, now we see it, and we have made this little here. What can I do when I come home? We want you to, for 10 minutes, sit and think about these questions. Elements of running organizations. Do you have some specific challenges that you want to share with the others? Have you got some new ideas from this seminar? Have you some good practices to share with the others? How to integrate human rights? Have you got some new ideas? You want to share some good practices? Some good projects, maybe? And the third subject, how to criticize religion. Have you got some new ideas? And some good practices to share? we want you, because now you are really the clever ones. You are experts on your own state, your own culture, your own work. And now is really the opportunity to also to share with the others your experiences. So, 10 minutes.